Snow was falling hard across the mountains. No one dared go out in weather like this. The wind howled like a beast, and the cold bit through even the thickest coats. In the midst of all that icy chaos, an old ranger's cabin stood alone on a hill. Inside lived a man who expected nothing more than silence and solitude. Then came a soft thud, followed by a faint whimper. Not human, something else, something desperate. He stepped outside, wrapped in layers, breath puffing in the air. Through the white blur, he saw two wild Mustangs standing near his gate, shivering and weak. One of them had a leg that buckled beneath it. They weren't running from danger, they were asking for help. His name was Jack Reagan, once a soldier, now just a man trying to forget. He hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks, not since retreating to this forgotten corner of the world. But here they were, two horses, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion, pleading without words. He opened the gate. What happened next changed everything. Inside the cabin, Jack paced. The fire crackled in the stove. Coffee warmed on the side. Hank, his old shepherd dog, watched him closely. He knew what people said about wild animals. Never get involved, never interfere. They belonged to the land, not to humans. But those eyes, the younger horse had fallen twice already, its body trembling as it tried to stand. The older one stayed close, protective, watching Jack with wary respect. They needed shelter. He grabbed hay, blankets, and whatever medical supplies he had left over from his time overseas. His hands shook not from the cold, but from something deeper, fear, guilt, maybe both. When he returned to the pen, the older mare sniffed the hay cautiously, then stepped aside to let the yearling eat. Jack approached slowly, blanket in hand. Heart pounding, he wrapped it around the smaller horse, careful not to startle it. The injured leg was swollen, probably sprained, or worse. He did what he could, wrapped it gently, murmured soft words, kept his movements slow. Hank sat nearby, ears twitching, watching every move. It wasn't much, but it was something, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he mattered. Morning came quietly. The storm had passed, leaving fresh snow and brittle air. Jack stepped outside, boots crunching through the frost. The horses were still there, both alive. The young one struggled to rise, but the mare nudged it gently, helping it up. Jack felt a lump in his throat. They were surviving together, just like he used to do with his comrades. He brewed coffee, staring out the frosted window. His mind wandered to places he rarely let himself revisit, memories of war, of friends lost, of a life he thought he'd buried. A snort broke his thoughts. He looked up. The older mare met his gaze, her eyes full of something he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, trust. He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing: he couldn't leave them out there. Days passed. Jack tended to them each morning, checking the bandage, feeding them, and speaking softly when they flinched at sudden sounds. Slowly, they grew stronger. The yearling could walk without limping too badly, though the leg still pained it. The mare never strayed far, always keeping watch. One night, as he sat by the fire with Hank curled beside him, Jack caught himself smiling. A real smile. Not forced, not faked, just there. He hadn't smiled like that in years. Then came the footprints, outside. Near the fence line, fresh tracks pressed into the snow. Humans. Not his. Jack's stomach dropped. He called Hank, grabbed his rifle, and followed the trail. It led toward the trees, where the wind whispered secrets through the branches. He found her, an outsider, bundled in thick layers. She introduced herself as Dr. Harper Lee, part of a team tracking lost Mustangs. She explained that these two had been separated from their herd during the storm. If they hadn't found help, they wouldn't have survived. She asked if he would help reunite them. He hesitated, then nodded. Together, they made a plan. Harper had a team waiting down the canyon, ready to transport the Mustangs to safety. But the roads were blocked, snow too deep for trucks. They needed another way. Jack had an idea. Old Charlie, the snowmobile he rarely used, was rusted, but still ran. With some adjustments, it could pull a sled for the horses. Harper agreed. That night, they prepared. Jack checked the fuel, tightened bolts, and lined the sled with blankets. Harper packed extra food, water, and medicine. They set off. Before dawn, the sky a deep blue, stars still clinging to the heavens. The horses followed without protest. They trusted Jack now. The journey was rough. Snowdrifts swallowed parts of the path. Hidden rocks threatened the yearling's footing. Wind howled through the canyon walls. At one point, the mare reared startled. By a sudden gust, Jack reached out, voice steady, hand open. She calmed. They kept going. Halfway through, the sky turned gray. Another storm. They barely made it to a shallow cave before snow blinded the valley. Inside, they built a fire and huddled close for warmth. The horses lay together, the mare curled protectively round the yearling. Jack stared into the flames, remembering what it felt like to be alone after the warhouse silence used to suffocate him. But now, sitting beside strangers, both human and animal, it felt different. Peaceful. Harper stirred beside him. "You're good with them," she said quietly. He shrugged. "They just needed someone. So did you." By morning, the storm had passed. The path ahead was clearer. They continued, reaching the frozen creek where Harper's team waited. 2 volunteers helped load the horses onto the transport truck, careful with the injured leg. Jack stood by as the door closed. The yearling looked at him one last time, ears forward. He touched the mare's nose through the gap. "Take care of each other," he whispered. The truck pulled away, disappearing into the snowy distance. Back at the cabin, Jack stood in the empty pen. Tracks gone, straw flattened. Silence returned, but it didn't feel the same. He brewed coffee, sat by the fire, and stared out the window. The mountains stretched beyond, endless and untouched. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Photos, updates, progress. The horses were healing, stronger now, ready to return to the wild. Harper invited him to be there for their release. He read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket. Yes, he would go. Months later, Jack stood on a ridge, wind in his hair. Below, the 3 Mustangs, now fully recovered, galloped across the hills. The mare led. The yearling followed, and the stallion brought up the rear. They were home, and so was he. Moral lesson: sometimes, saving others helps us heal ourselves.